Hello, my name is Keith St. Clair, and we're here today with Marcelo Suarez Orozco, who has written a new book called Learning a New Land.
That's right.
Welcome, Marcelo.
My pleasure.
Can you tell us a little bit about your new book?
So, we are now in the middle of the largest wave of immigration in the history of our country. More people are coming to the U.S. now than ever before in the history of the United States. We now have roughly 70 million people that are either immigrants or the children of immigrants born in the United States. About 36 million are immigrants, meaning foreign-born, people born in Jamaica, born in the Philippines, born in China, who migrate to the United States, or their children. If you put them together, what we call the foreign stock population of the United States is now at over 70 million people. This study is really the first study of its kind that follows a cohort of 400 families from the three regions that now dominate the new immigration to the United States: Asia, the Caribbean, and Latin America. Over a period of time, it's a longitudinal study where we examine the lives of these families with a focus on children and the transition of children through schooling, through education, into our society.
And how are they doing with the transition? Is it, are the children having an easier time than the parents?
That's a very good question. Each generation has a different set of opportunities and challenges. In some ways, for the parents, the task of migration, monumental as it is more clearly defined. You have to find a job, you have to find a safe place to live, you have to constitute a community, you have to learn the language, and in a way, you have to move on with the sense that you've originated somewhere else, and often there's a sense of gratitude that you have opportunities in a new country to move ahead. For the children, the story is a little bit more complicated because more often than not, their frame of reference is really the United States. These are children that in fundamental ways develop American identities. More often than not, English is their dominant language. More often than not, they really don't know about the country from where their parents came from. And their task is, in many ways, trying to develop an identity where they can knit together pieces of the history and the culture from where the parents come from with the new American identity. So in many ways, where the immigrants themselves, where the parents often have a clearer task ahead of them. For the children, it's in some ways a different set of challenges and a different set of opportunities.
So in general, the children are learning English, is that correct?
So the children of immigrants today are learning English faster and better than in any previous wave of immigration to our country. 100 years ago, in the Lower East Side of New York, millions of Eastern Europeans, millions of Italians were coming into our country. Very few of them really went through the educational system, through schooling. Something like 70% of all Italians never really graduated from high school. Yet, through floor shop mobility, through the Industrial Revolution, through the Fordist economy, eventually these children and these families were able to achieve a middle-class standard of living. But education, and hence English, was less relevant to that journey. Today, the vast majority of the children of immigrants are enrolled in our schools. And really, even though we have dropout problems, and even though we have certain enduring problems
I think so.
in our educational system,
Do you remember?
the
It was
majority
really
of children
cool animation
enroll in
People or
schools.
something. It was like,
Therefore, they're
Actually, I
learning
saw it
English
at
more
Temple, at
universally
Sunday
and at a
school.
faster rate than before. But the
No,
issue is that they face a very
it's a
different
human
economy moving forward. So
Yeah, I
here
was at
we'd
Temple
like
when I
to
saw it.
separate out
Well, it actually
learning
was on
conversational
Sunday. It was
English
Sunday school.
from learning the kind
I
of
don't
higher
know.
order English,
Reformed.
what we call academic English, that will enable
right.
these children to really
The
fully
Grand Rapids
engage
Community
and
College
compete
channel is moving.
with
The
their
College channel will soon be
native-speaking
located on
peers
Comcast Digital Channel
in what will
903.
be a much,
But don't
much
worry,
more
you can still get
tough,
College Channel
competitive,
programming at home.
in some ways
If you're a
unforgiving
Comcast
global
customer,
economy.
You're entitled to a free
So the
digital
children of
tuner
immigrants
just
are
by calling
learning
this
English.
toll-free number.
The question we need to ask is, are we doing a good enough
877-824-2984.
job? Are we
Each
giving them
household
the
can
kind
get
of
up to
academic
2 free
English
tuners.
that they're going to
Again, the
need
toll-free number for your free
to
digital
pass
tuner is
a high-stakes
877-824-2984.
test, multiple
You can
choice
also watch
test.
the College
And
Channel
that's where we
online
see
at grcc.tv.
serious problems. So we see the kids are
Really?
moving into conversational English.
Is that bad?
Like
Yes,
in
so
previous waves of immigration to our country, they're
Okay,
losing
well,
their native
especially if they're
tongue.
not on hold for very long.
One of my colleagues at Harvard put it very well. He said the
GRCC's
U.S.
campus will be
is a
closed for the
cemetery for
holidays from
languages.
December 21st through
The
January
Dutch
1st. The
brought
campus will
their
reopen
language,
on Wednesday,
the
January
Germans brought their
2nd.
language,
The GRCC
the Japanese
website,
brought
the
their
online
language, the
student center,
Italians
and
brought their
Blackboard
language.
will
All of
continue
those
to be
languages were
available during
buried
this time.
in the United States. We have the same pattern.
done?
Today, by the
Oh my
second,
gosh.
certainly by the third generation, Chinese origin kids, Hispanic origin kids are losing their language at a very, very huge rate. And they're moving into English.
That strikes me as a shame. I mean, on the one hand, it's nice learning the new language, essential maybe, but to lose one's parents' language seems like a tremendous loss, because being bilingual could certainly open some economic doors in business. Why is it that they're losing their own language? Are their parents failing to teach their kids their native language?
So I concur with you that in the context of an increasingly globalized economy, while the kids need English, that increasingly is not enough. It's a paradox, right, that most middle-class families are spending fortunes to have their children learn a second language. I was in the faculty at Harvard for many years. My wife is Swiss and speaks French, and she speaks Spanish also. And we would have Harvard undergraduates come and practice Spanish, French with us, right? So families are investing fortunes for their kids to become bilingual, to learn Chinese, to learn Spanish, to learn other languages. At the same time, the kind of bilingual resources that the immigrant origin communities bring to their countries are really going to waste. And there are economic issues that you suggested. There are also diplomatic issues. There are also security issues. If you read the Iraq report, for example, one of the most scandalous findings is how few of our personnel in Baghdad can fully function in Arabic. So there are urgent, clear economic advantages, diplomatic advantages, business advantages, security advantages in the 21st century to encourage a kind of a normative bilingualism where all our children are able to function in more than one language. Now, to function in more than one language, you need, in some ways, more than just the parents speaking at home. Languages to endure in the long term really require deep literacy supports. You have to have newspapers, you have to have magazines, you have to have books. Otherwise, yes, you maintain it, but you maintain it at a very superficial level. And when you get into the more complex aspects of language, into the higher order cognitive indices of language, then you begin to see the limitation of having this kind of folkloristic home language as opposed to really the academic language, which is what you want in the 21st century.
So it's really a struggle for parents to preserve the language, even if they really would like to see that for their children. They lack the supports in this country, such as a foreign language press and maybe television programming in the native language that would kind of preserve that?
So in general, if you want to preserve a language, you need to have these literacy mechanisms. It's not enough to speak it at home. You need to have books, you need to have libraries, you need to have newspapers, you need to have a variety of supports. That's how you learn a second language. If you go to the Netherlands tomorrow, learning Dutch is really hard. And learning academic Dutch, I've given a number of lectures in the Netherlands, and you begin to pick up things, but you also realize how superficial these things are. Very different to be able to go and ask for a beer at a bar, right, and then sitting down and reading, a major academic or business work.
Now, the parents, are they learning English as well as the children? How is their struggle in learning the language? Are they acquiring the skills that you feel are necessary, or do you think that that's holding them back economically?
Well, again, it's very difficult to generalize because this wave of immigration to our country, unlike the wave of immigration of 100 years ago, is really much, much more diverse than ever before. In fact, there is a kind of a hyper-diversity in the new migration that we've simply never seen before. So if you look at the socioeconomic and educational background of new immigrants coming to the U.S., it's a deeply, let's call it divergent. It's really a kind of a dimorphic dynamic. On the one hand, you have immigrants that have never been so highly educated and skilled. Immigrants today are overrepresented in the category of winners of the Nobel Prize for the United States. They're overrepresented in the category of deans at Harvard University, tenure professors. They're overrepresented in the category, in any of the basic categories of scientific and scholarly merit, business merit. Immigrants are completely overrepresented. You can't run a major research university in the United States today without a substantial number of immigrant origin faculty members and increasingly students. The kids are more likely to be winners of the Intel Science Awards, for example, than ever before in the history of the United States. At the same time, so we have one end of this wave, extremely highly educated people coming to our country. Today, there are more doctors from Ghana in New York State than in Ghana. That gives you a sense of just how skewed this distribution is. At the same time, very large numbers of immigrants, like in the past, like the poor European peasants that came to our country 100 years ago, really tend to have much, much lower levels of education, skill, and really face a much tougher transition to the better remunerated sectors of the opportunity structure once they come to the United States, because our economy is increasingly extremely segmented, and education has become really the most powerful mediator that will enhance status mobility. So the parents, if you come with a highly educated background and you come with high levels of skill, they really tend to bypass what 100 years ago took 2 or 3 generations. And they're really setting themselves up in the middle class in 1 generation. In other words, what took the Irish and the Italians and the Eastern Europeans 100 years ago, 2, 3 generations, these new immigrants, highly educated immigrants, are achieving really in 1 generation. At the same time, large numbers of immigrants with less education are really having a very, very tough time moving out of the sectors of the economy that first drew them to the United States, which would include the service sector, the agricultural sector, and the like.
It's a very controversial issue, how many immigrants we should allow in this country. Certainly we have a large number of illegal immigrants. Do you feel that immigrants to this country are a net gain for the United States economically? there's a lot of talk about how we have to expend money educating them in public schools, and they're a drain on the healthcare system, but they also pay taxes like sales taxes. So do you see immigrants as a net economic gain for the United States or a net loss?
So the preponderance of evidence is very, very clear on this matter. The National Research Council, which is the research arm of the U.S. Congress, did a state-of-the-art, massive meta-study of all the indicators of the relationship between immigration and the economy. And the preponderance of evidence suggests that overall, immigrants are a net asset to the U.S. economy. And the way this works is very, very fascinating. It works in many ways. You mentioned the obvious question, which has to do with the fiscal implications of large-scale immigration. Somebody has to pay for health, somebody has to pay for schooling, somebody has to pay for the criminal justice system. How does that add up? The way immigration and the economy tends to work is really via either direct or indirect mechanisms. The most important obvious direct benefits that come from immigration come from the fact that the U.S. economy today is absorbing, is metabolizing extremely high levels of quality human capital that is free of any investment from our tax base population. In other words, when a doctor comes from Ghana to practice in Grand Rapids, Michigan, that individual comes to our system and immediately begins to become a productive contributor to the U.S. economy. By some estimates, the U.S. is now getting roughly $50 billion in high-quality human capital. This would be the doctors from Ghana, the doctors from Jamaica, the engineers from India, the engineers from China, who are coming to the United States and free of any outlays from our tax-paying structures begin to produce. That's a very, very direct mechanism. A very powerful indirect mechanism by which immigration and the economy intersect is by immigrants free native workers to pursue their fortunes in sectors of the opportunity structure where their returns for their investment to labor are much, much greater. In other words, it frees, this is economics 101, right? This is how trade works. If you specialize on making coats, and I specialize on making ties, we can enter into a trade relationship, and I can make better ties, and you can make better coats, and we exchange, and we can trade,
yes.
Right? Immigrants free U.S. citizens to pursue their interests in certain sectors of the economy where they're much more productive and where their returns for their investment in labor are much greater. By one theory, women in the United States, middle-class women, probably benefited the most by having a large source of foreign-born workers provide a host of services that enables them then to pursue other venues in the economy. Those are the so-called indirect effects. So what many economists will tell you is that immigrants are a net asset to the U.S. economy because it allows for specialization. You don't need to do a lot of jobs that others are going to do, and you can focus your energies in certain domains where...
So you can hire an immigrant more cheaply in some areas to allow you to have more time to pursue other work.
Correct.
Okay. What can a community college do to assist these new immigrants and help develop the skills that would allow for a greater use of their economic energies in the greater economy?
Well, let me say that I'm delighted to be here at Grand Rapids Community College. I'm a product of the community college system. Both my wife and I went through the California community colleges, and we transferred to the University of California. And I'm probably my wife and I were probably one of the very few members of the Harvard faculty that had started our career in community colleges. So I'm a big believer in the community college, especially as a transfer mechanism, in your case, to a great university system like the Michigan system. So I think that often community college can serve as a point of entry, as a bridge to ease the transition of the immigrant origin population into really these magnificent institutions of higher learning that are really our unique asset and our unique advantage. I travel and lecture all over the world, and the American university system really remains the most competitive, the most highly advanced, the most highly regarded worldwide. And I think that community colleges play a very significant role in easing the transition and in often supporting and nourishing the skills that the immigrant origin student population is going to need moving forward.
Okay, so perhaps more offerings in English as a second language?
Language supports would be very, very important. And also courses that would help the immigrant origin population understand more about the U.S. education system. It's very, very it's a very baroque system if you come from the outside, and really to offer mentoring opportunities. Our research shows that in every case where an immigrant origin kid does much better than she or he should be doing given their general socioeconomic and educational background, there was a mentor. There was somebody in the background, either an English teacher, a coach, a member of the church, a member of a community group that was there showing the way to the new society. So there is a tremendous amount of good, there is a tremendous amount of opportunities that can be developed to connect with the new communities and to ease their transition into the American family. This is the future of our country.
Have you found a significant difference between the legal immigrants and illegal immigrants as far as their ability to assimilate? Is the distinction relatively insignificant?
Well, the distinction is very significant if you happen to be a legal versus an illegal immigrant. So what's interesting is that the data suggests that in the vast majority of the cases, what we tend to see is blended, so-called blended families, where some members of the family are U.S. citizens, some members of the family might be permanent lawful residents, and some members of the family might be illegal immigrants. It's one of the reasons why in the previous wave of debate in the U.S. Senate, the president said very clearly and forcefully, it's impossible to develop a plan to deport these families because most of these families have members who are either U.S. citizens or permanent lawful residents, which would then mean if we are to deport the estimated 12 million illegal immigrants in our country, we would be basically breaking up maybe 20 million families, some of which have U.S. citizens and permanent residents in the families.
Makes it more tragic.
So it makes it nearly impossible. I can't imagine a wealthy, advanced democracy deporting 12 million people, breaking up maybe 20 million families. It simply is unimaginable.
Well, we are out of time, but I thank you, Marcelo Orozco. And his new book is
Learning a New Land.
Learning a New Land. So look forward at your bookstores. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.